This week we're going to have a discussion about growing. And this builds right off of our productive, because if you're being productive... Why am I getting like tongue-tied in everything?
Probably just tired of talking. We've been doing it so long. We're probably just like, live it up. It's probably the most entertaining one though.
All right. Thanks for joining us. My name is Kanisha.
And I'm Sylvia.
This week we're going to talk about making sure that we're growing during our time. We talked about how we wanted to make sure we were staying productive during the pandemic. But even during the pandemic, we want to make sure that we are growing. You don't want to stay stagnant. You want to make sure that you're moving further down the road. So without further ado, Sylvia's going to take the lead.
Okay, so the thought behind this is once again relevant to an experience I had, which is generally what we do, right? We look at day-to-day life and we see it as a manifestation of our faith, right? So I was staring out my window and looking at my balcony. I've got some plants out there and some other things going on. And so before I get too far into that, think about growth. What do we typically, how do you typically associate things with growth? What do you think about when someone says, they're experiencing growth?
Well, an increase.
An increase. Okay. Here we live in the US of A, right? Growth is typically associated with like an increase or status, some sort of prominence, success, things like that, right? And a lot of times it's got like a monetary or a value associated with it. And then, if that's what it is, though, how do you achieve it? How do we do this growth thing? And so typically you think, if I have $5 and I add $5 more to it, I got 10 and it grew. And that makes perfect sense, except it creates like a really shallow view of what growth is and it simplifies it. And so when you don't see that happening in your life, you think you're not growing or you're not making progress.
And that's not how it always works.
No, it's not. And so it's not always as simple as 1 + 1 = 2 or a straight line this way or a straight up that way. Sometimes growth looks like that. And you're trying to figure out.
Y'all didn't see it. I had to make sure. You all got another view of
that growth.
Growth.
Because it's never, in real life, look at your experiences and things. It never went like that. It didn't go that way. And so what does it look like? How does it happen? How do we do it? And those are just our minds working and simplifying things for us. But I think we cheat ourselves when we limit that view to that narrow perspective. And if you check in your Bible, stuff grew all the time and it was like, I don't know how that happened. Okay. And so one example that I looked at was when Jesus fed the 5,000. And it's a really good example of the carnal mind, right? How we think. Here are these people and Jesus is looking at them and he's having compassion on them, right? And he's healing their sick. And then as the day goes on, the disciples, who seem to be competent people, come to him and say, there's nothing here, right? We need to send the people away so they can get something to eat. Makes perfect sense. We have the human strategy in place. This is how we will help these people. Jesus is like, you don't have to do that. I got it. We will feed them. What?
I got this.
That's what he said. And that's the interesting part of our lives, right? We look at a barren place and say nothing can happen here, right? But Jesus comes in and says, don't worry about it. I got it. What do we have? And he takes whatever we have and he makes it into whatever it is that you need. And so that is an example of the way biblical growth works. But the truth of the matter is, us as people, we don't have the mind to understand the Lord's growth strategy.
We've been done cut everybody out. It's the only food we got. Okay. Y'all gonna have to wait.
Exactly. There's no way that they could have visualized this. Even walking with Jesus and knowing him to be who he was, they still didn't have the mindset to understand his growth strategy. And we're the same way. And so going back to my balcony, right? I have a plant out there. And it was a gift, another volunteer. Volunteers like me, I like my volunteers, they do nice things. And I'm on the phone and they're like, hey, do you want a blackberry start? And I'm like, I don't have a yard, I live in a condo. And I was like, yeah, yeah, I want the blackberry start. I don't even know what to do with this thing, right?
Eat the blackberries when they come.
I can do that. So he brings me this jug with a stick in it. And I'm like, Okay, and so if you're familiar with propagation, what happened was someone had a blackberry bush, and from it they were planning to make another one. So you take a branch from the live and thriving bush, right? You prune it and you stick it in the ground, or you stick it into a pot. You bend it over and stick it in, and that branch will begin to grow roots, right? But wait a minute, it is amazing. Because how does the branch know to stop growing leaves and blackberries and to start growing roots?
That is amazing.
Who told the branch?
Right.
Who told the branch? And so think about it in your mind, right? When you were in a situation and then God moved you and placed you in a new situation, how did you know to change your behavior? Most of us didn't, right? That was us moving or operating in faith to allow Him to show us and guide us. An example for me, like changing careers, right? I worked in education for years, but then I moved into healthcare. I knew nothing about healthcare. I knew everything about education and higher ed. And so coming over here, how did I know to stop growing these things and to start growing this? Or you're a mother, right? First time you had a child, how did you know to stop doing certain things and to start doing others?
You know, that along with this blackberry is amazing. I'm telling you, I don't know. It's just like overnight.
So we have to move forward in faith to do the new thing, right? And so the branch begins to grow roots. And then after those roots are established, you can cut it from the previous bush, and that's where my stick came from. And in the jug, there were roots and soil. And so I took it out. I have this massive pot that's sitting on my balcony. And I put it in there with some soil and fertilizer. And I was like, all right, so my blackberry's name is Berry. It's a girl. And I looked at Berry and I said, all right, Berry, let's grow. I talked to the person who gave me the start. I said, you know, hey, I got it planted. And he says to me, it needs plenty of direct sunlight. And I was like, it's hot out there.
It is.
It is hot.
Good for the bush.
But it is good for the berries. And so that direct sunlight is what they thrive in. But for us, hours and hours and hours and hours of direct sunlight would be harsh.
Yes.
It would be debilitating, dangerous. Could give sunburn to some people. You'd end up dehydrated. And so what is good for the bush is not good for somebody else. And I was kind of amazed by that. I was like, you know, that's it. Think about the challenging situations you've been in. Something that you look back on and you thrived in could have destroyed somebody else, right? But in that situation, Berry is going to grow.
It's just the grace of God. We don't understand it.
No, we don't. So I'm watching Berry, and it's kind of funny, and I'm like chasing the sun around my balcony, right? I don't have a yard. So I'm trying to, like every couple of hours I go outside and I like move it over here and I move it over
dedicated.
there. I'm dedicated. I'm not going to kill this plant, okay? I want to see growth happen. And I'm making sure that Berry gets water and Berry has plenty of direct sunlight. And again, you know, like if I just gave you sun and water, what would they do for you?
Well,
exactly. So after a couple of weeks, I'm looking at Berry, right? And I look down in the dirt and something green is coming up. And I'm like, well, a weed in my bush, right? How did that get in there?
Already?
Yes. How did that happen? I followed the instructions. I did what I was supposed to do. I'm taking care of this plant. It's not like it's outside in the yard. She is separated and protected. Where did you get this weed from, Barry? And so I'm talking to the volunteer on the phone, and I forgot about the weed. And then I said, hey, I still got my blackberry start out here. And before I can say anything else, he starts to say, the stick, it takes a while for it to grow. And you won't see any fruit on it this year, of course. But what happens is you have the root, the new bush comes out from the ground. The stick will not grow anything. And I said, wow. So again, it made me think about me and how I think, right? I've done what I'm supposed to do. I got everything planned out, right? I'm looking to see something happen. And then here I am looking, and I'm like this, and I'm watching, and I'm waiting, and I'm watching. And what I'm needing is coming from over here. Okay? And so the same thing happened with Barry, right? I'm looking at the stick. I'm looking at the
bush growing from the ground.
It's a stick. It's a stick. It's not even a bush. It's a stick. I'm looking at the stick like, okay, something's gonna happen with this stick. And all the time, the bush is coming from the bottom. It's coming from somewhere else.
I am amazed by this bush. I just have to say, I might need one.
Who told the bush? But isn't that how life works? Here we are looking for what we expect to happen, right? What we've decided, and it's very presumptuous of me, I guess you could say, because I knew nothing about blackberries, right? But I had made up in my mind how this was gonna go. But Barry is showing me a few things here. So I'm looking for whatever it is that I expect to happen. Whatever it is that I have decided is right or wrong. This is how blackberries grow. I didn't have the mind to understand the Lord's growth strategy. The old life is gone for Barry,
right?
Including that stick. What is growing and the new flourishment that's gonna happen is coming from the new roots. And now, thank the Lord, I didn't pull it out.
And weed. No. Weed now looks good for you.
Yes, I was going to snatch it right out. Like, what is this? And he said, no, that's your new bush growing. And yeah, let that grow and it'll be fine. And I even looked it up online. I was like, yeah, look at that. Look at the leaves and all of that. And so Barry is growing. And it just really made me think, what does it take to grow? And the growth process is so full of surprises. It is so full of changes and all the obstacles that we think hinder us, okay, really can be for our good. So, all that time outside in the sun, right? All of that time just burning up, sweating hot. When you're going through something, you don't know that may make you flourish. And it may make you become grander and more beautiful. And I'm not just talking about like in the visual sense, but even on the inside.
I mean, even with the bush, you think about it. Everything is taking place underground. And it's just like things that take place in us. It happens from the inside out.
Exactly. And then all people see is what happened afterwards. I don't know what went on in that dirt.
When people are going through their journey with God and their growth process, a lot of the times we like to, decide or pass judgment on how the growth is taking place. Like, oh no, they ain't doing this and they ain't doing that. But the scripture talks about how one plants, one waters, and God gives the increase. God is going to give the increase when he's ready to give the increase. I don't have to stir it down. Sylvia said she kept on looking at the bush, trying to see what Barry got going on.
Right. And that's the way our life works. When we follow after God, we don't see all the minute details. And it is not as simple as 1 + 1 is 2. There are so many things working in the underground, in the background, in the foreground that we haven't seen yet, that lend themselves to our growth. And we have to have enough faith and trust in God to go with it, allow Him to lead you, and allow that growth to happen. And so that is just what, like my goal is during this time. By the time Barry sprouts a little bit more, I want to sprout a little bit more. I want to grow. I want to take, I think about it when I look out the window and I'm checking her out, got a lot of time. I'm like, she's out there. And that sun, and it's hot, y'all. I think the heat in this stays like 102 or something. And I'm thinking to myself, it gives her life. And when she grows, she'll give life to something else. And that is the real growth cycle, right? Is that you feed someone else. And so it's not about my success or my status. My purpose is to build the kingdom. And so Barry is gonna grow, and I'm gonna make really great cobbler, and everybody's gonna be happy. And so what is gonna grow in you? What are you gonna feed to someone else? And how is it gonna help give them life?